This summer stretched on longer than usual. The climate remained mild and radiant well into September. It was as though the foliage clung stubbornly to the branches, loath to let go. Summer defiantly held its ground, battling the encroaching autumn with fervor. By mid-October, however, the inevitable became apparent. Nature's course is unalterable. The northern gales arrived with a mischievous howl, carrying torrents of relentless rain and an icy mist that seeped through our garments. The once lush leaves were swiftly vanquished from their perches, forming a kaleidoscopic quilt on the ground. The persistent misty rain soon rendered the leaves brittle and treacherous. Gusts swirled around, attempting to whisk them away from the tarmac by their frayed tips. Yet these fallen leaves seemed to grip the pavement, a last desperate attempt to recall the warmth of summer. Come November, the persistent rains gave way to biting frosts. Each morning, the sidewalks and trees appeared as though dusted with confectioner's sugar. Over the ice-glazed puddles, the weak autumn sun cast lazy, shimmering reflections. Its light, uncertain and fickle, made one long for the swift arrival of night. Yet the night brought no solace. The street lamps, seemingly hesitant, threw a weak, clattering illumination across the nocturnal avenues, enhancing a sense of longing for home and fostering a somber air of despondency. The night is a playground for the sinister, a time when shadows stir and phantoms wander freely, a moment when the dread of oblivion becomes most palpable. I arrived at a magnificent two-story mansion nestled deep within a historic park. Exiting my vehicle with caution, mindful of the slippery ground, I ascended the steps adorned with a delicate layer of frost. Being early in the day, the janitor hadn't yet had a chance to clean them and scatter sand and salt for traction. As I reached the porch, the door swung open as though it had been anticipating my arrival. "Who are you looking for?" inquired the drowsy caretaker, her words dripping with reluctance as she covered a yawn with her palm. "Good morning, I'm in search of Alina Sergeevna Zagorskaya. I was raised without a mom. She abandoned me and my dad when I was barely a toddler. Much later, I discovered she'd eloped with her lover. Apparently, I didn't fit into her rosy future. My family generally avoided talking about her. Once my grandmother mentioned that she went off in search of a blissful life and is now living somewhere overseas. I didn't press for details, and Grandma never brought it up again. Something that still baffles me is how she could walk away from her one-year-old child and never think about him again. People often criticize men for being heartless. What a joke. Chasing personal happiness, a woman will stop at nothing. She'll bulldoze over everything in her way. Everything, including her own kids. I now see that women surpass men in both cruelty and cunningness. A woman doesn't owe anyone a thing. After Mom left, Dad stayed single for a long time. Did he love me? Who knows? Sometimes I felt like he directed his frustration toward me because of Mom's betrayal. Anyway, I stayed with Grandma, and Dad popped in now, and then with some cheap little toys. He poured himself into his work and career. Lucky for him, he ran a booming construction business. When I was 14, my father finally tied the knot. The wedding is still etched in my memory. The groom, a tall and imposing 40-year-old, and the bride, Lena, or Alina Sergeevna, and almost 20 years his junior, were the picture of bliss. It was a day of guests, clinking glasses, and an upscale restaurant. And just like that, I had a stepmother. A year or so after my father's marriage, my grandmother passed away. She bequeathed her apartment to me, though I wouldn't be able to live there until I reached adulthood, so living with my father was a must. Oh, how I loathed my stepmother. Despite all her efforts to connect with me, I met every overture with a stony, detached silence. She earnestly tried to speak my language. She whipped up scrumptious meals for me, bought me clothes, and handled my school lunches since Dad was perpetually engulfed in work. She even nursed me back to health when I fell ill. But it all fell on deaf ears. My resentment towards her only intensified. Yet I couldn't pinpoint why I felt that way. Was it jealousy over my mother? I'd never even met her. Was it my father? We were scarcely close. To put it mildly, I frankly didn't care about him. It was baseless, childish resentment, an absolute refusal to accept this woman. I once swiped a brew from a grocery store, not because I was broke, but just to show off foolishly. Lena was the one who bailed me out when the cuffs got involved. Back at the house, she attempted to drill into me how both drinking excessively and stealing were bad habits. I scoffed, "What are you, my mom? You're nothing but a stepping stone for my dad. Stay in your lane." I noticed tears welling up in her eyes. Without a word, she quietly got up and exited the room. She kept the incident to herself and didn't breathe a word of it to my dad. On hitting 18, I enlisted in the military. A year into my service, I took the plunge and signed up at a military academy. Home was the last place I wanted to be. 4 years flew by, and I graduated as a lieutenant, only to be thrust straight into one of the numerous conflict zones. That skirmish didn't leave a lasting impression on me. As the winter sun dipped lower in the sky, the temperature dropped, sending chills through the air. The soldiers exhaled, their breath-forming mist that mingled with the skeletal branches of the trees gracing the gentle slope where we observed our foe. Eventually, the sun vanished behind a veil of clouds, ensuring that no treacherous ray of light would give away our position by glinting off our weapons or binocular lenses. To our right, the Ula River snaked its way towards the sea, a somber gray ribbon in the distance. Down below, our adversaries awaited. Our mission was incredibly straightforward: locate the enemy and relay their precise coordinates to our artillery. It seemed like a piece of cake. As my trusty radio operator initiated the transmission of enemy data, an unexpected barrage of bullets suddenly pummeled us from behind. The sheer force of those projectiles had the ground quivering beneath me. In a split second, my comrade beside me let out a cry and dropped to the ground, felled by the relentless attack. Determined, I unleashed measured bursts of gunfire, straining my eyes to spot the elusive foe amidst the enveloping darkness. Simultaneously, I made desperate attempts to contact my commanding officer through our internal communication system. Unfortunately, the enemy had seized control of our frequency, cleverly disrupting our connection, leaving nothing but a cacophonous crackle in my headphones. Mirroring the somber reality that unfolded, the sounds of gunfire emanated from no one else on our side. It dawned on me that my comrades had fallen within minutes of the battle's commencement. Amidst the chaos, a single thought consumed me. Had our radio operator managed to transmit the enemy's coordinates to our artillerists in the nick of time? Time marched on, and all too swiftly, I found myself depleted of ammunition. I instinctively reached for my reliable Stetson and fumbled in my equipment for a spare clip. From the right, 2 silhouettes darted towards me. With a few shots fired without aim, I sought to strike them down. I believe my bullets hit their mark. Though I'd found myself trapped, I resolved to bargain my life. Turning to the lifeless radio engineer, I shielded his body and switched on the radio station, which luckily remained unharmed. Shifting to an alternate frequency, undiscovered by the enemy, I commenced relaying the target's coordinates, inviting the inferno of artillery fire upon myself. The machine gunner detected my movements and unleashed another round of gunfire. I could feel the bullets embedding themselves into the radio engineer's corpse. Fear didn't encompass me. Rather, I was already mentally deceased, acutely aware that only a miracle could save me. The final recollection etched in my mind was the piercing whistle of shells, and the thunderous reverberations of explosions around me. I was severely injured, enduring a perilous wound that caused a significant loss of blood. Consequently, upon my arrival at the hospital, I was in a critical state. Regrettably, my father was either unwilling or unable to come to business commitments. However, Lena, without hesitation, made an appearance. Although I lay unconscious, my companions informed me that she remained faithfully by my side throughout. Remarkably, she even obtained a temporary position as a nurse within our hospital to ensure her proximity to me. Yet, as I gradually recovered, she departed, seemingly apprehensive about the potential reaction from a young and wayward individual, such as myself, perhaps as I have been imprinted upon her memory. On my bedside table, I discovered a captivating package containing a luxurious Swiss Army watch, accompanied by a note bearing a solitary word: recuperate. Within a month, I was back to my old self. The secret sauce: intense therapy paired with the vigor of youth. And guess what? I also found love. Olia, a nurse at the hospital, had stolen my heart. No one came close to her in my eyes. Slender and graced with enchanting green eyes shrouded in mist, she was the epitome of all a woman could be. I could tell my ward mates were green with envy, and it made me swell with pride knowing that this stunning woman picked me out of the entire town's eligible bachelors. By the time I was ready to leave the hospital, I was all set to pop the question. Olga had already dropped a few hints about tying the knot. Introducing her to my father, though, didn't cross my mind. Dad couldn't care less about what was going on in my life. Word on the street was that he had split with Lena, but the nitty-gritty, not on my radar, and frankly, I couldn't be bothered. At the military medical center, compassionate physicians carefully examined me, scrutinizing my test results and cardiogram. It almost seemed as if they were eager to sample my very essence. However, they refrained from sinking their teeth into me. Instead, they rendered a verdict: I am cleared for continued service without any limitations. They granted me a well-deserved month-long furlough for both rehabilitation and the holy bond of matrimony. For soldiers, the process of getting married is somewhat simplified, so a mere 7 days into my respite, we sealed our love with a wedding ceremony. Immediately following our nuptials, my beloved Olga and I embarked on a romantic escapade to the sunny shores of the Southern Sea. We later paid visits to her parents and sister, cherishing every moment. Alas, all good things must come to an end, and as my vacation drew to a close, I received my new duty assignment. With my youthful wife by my side, we ventured forth toward an unfamiliar post. I was swiftly captivated by the cadence of military existence. I assumed the role of a commanding officer for an independent reconnaissance battalion, leaving me with scarce moments of respite. My days were consumed within the confines of the unit, while Olga, left idle, underwent a transformation from an amiable young lady into a disillusioned individual. Inactivity has a tendency to drive people to madness, particularly inexperienced young women. Upon returning from my time in the military, I was met with anything but warmth from my beloved spouse. Instead, she unleashed a storm of fury. She clung onto every little detail. A solitary unwashed plate, shoes disheveled, and a jacket haphazardly thrown over a chair became the fuel for her anger. I made every effort to offer solace and understanding to my wife, recognizing that this was not an easy period for her. Olia was already with child. I held on to the hope that the impending arrival of our little one would bring about a change, as I gazed upon her swollen belly, a symbol of the future we would be bringing into this world. Was I kind to her? I believe I was, as she continued to adore me regardless. The memory of her fingers digging into my back while she squirmed beneath my hold lingers vividly. darling," she wept, "just keep going. Please don't stop." Following the arrival of Vicky, it seemed our lives took a turn for the better. Olga was perpetually engaged with our daughter, and our bond appeared to strengthen significantly. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling of a growing coldness between us. Olga began avoiding me, consistently looking away during our conversations. I brushed off any troubling thoughts, diving deep into work and tackling our domestic issues head-on. And there were plenty. Olga was so spent by the end of each day that she couldn't muster the energy to attend to Vicky at night. Eager to support my wife, I took on nighttime duties, feeding Vika, changing diapers, often dozing off in the kitchen, my head slumped against the fridge. As the days relentlessly marched on, Vika matured, and the rhythms of our family life found a steady cadence. That's how we navigated through another year. Despite my relentless efforts, working tirelessly both day and night in hopes of a break, a vacation remained elusive, always pushed back due to endless pressing matters. Meanwhile, Olga and our daughter spent the entire summer at her parents' place. The grandparents doted on their granddaughter, showering her with love. The time away seemed to rejuvenate Olga. Upon her return, she was more tender and affectionate than ever. Our romantic life blossomed anew, vibrant with vivid hues. In the waning weeks of summer, our unit was mobilized as members of the UN Peacekeeping Corps to Mali, situated nearly at the heart of the African continent. A fierce civil war had erupted, compelling the peacekeepers to intervene and keep the combatants apart. Initially, Olga and I kept in touch regularly. She'd update me about life back home and share tales of our daughter's milestones. However, as time marched on, her letters dwindled to a trickle and eventually ceased. Although we had some form of mobile connectivity with our homeland, the network in Mali was basic at best, making phone calls back home an unlikely feat. After half a year stationed abroad, I was suddenly ordered back to Russia. The reasons behind the abrupt end of my deployment were unclear, but that mattered little to me. The thought of returning to my wife and daughter filled me with an indescribable joy. My duffel bag was stuffed to the brim with souvenirs and presents for my beloved girls. Upon touchdown at the airport, eager to hear Olga's voice, I dialed her number only to find her phone was off. I left my travel bag in the hallway and entered the apartment. The expansive living room was empty, but I could hear a man's voice and a woman's laughter emanating from the kitchen. I cautiously approached the kitchen, taking care not to make the floorboards creak, and gently opened the door. Seated at the table, a man sat shirtless, a glass flute in his grasp. And on his lap, there sat Olga, clad in a short t-shirt, giggling merrily. She clung to his neck and whispered something in his ear, all the while caressing his hairy chest with her free hand. The audacious man brazenly explored between her legs, while nibbling at her dark brown nipples, swollen with desire. In that moment, I immediately recognized him as Major Khmerov, the haughty head of our local military store. What a despicable fellow. A treacherous rat indeed. For quite some time, there have been murmurs circulating in our garrison about his advances towards officers' wives. Rumors they were, but no one had ever caught him in the act. Well, now he had been caught red-handed. It dawned on me abruptly that without any control, I was instinctively drawing out the combat knife swinging on my right hip, cased in a plastic covering. I shifted my gaze towards my clenched hand. The faint illumination bestowed an eerie radiance upon the meticulously sharpened blade. For an instant, it seemed as though death himself was pirouetting on the knife's edge, resolute and pitiless. Oblivious to my presence, they were utterly engrossed, despite me standing mere feet away. Strangely enough, I felt no astonishment regarding the unfolding spectacle. It was as though I was observing this provocative performance detached from it all. In some peculiar manner, I was prepared for this unforeseen turn of events, but it did briefly prick my heart with indescribable pain. In a flash, our entire life together with Olga flickered before my eyes. I grappled with the enigma of why she would commit such an act against me. For a fleeting moment, I questioned if it was all just a dreadful dream, longing to wake up and find my adored wife slumbering peacefully beside me. The image of her customary slumber, her contented smile, and the warmth of her gentle touch engulfed me. But the cruel reality was so unjust that it even summoned tears to well up in my eyes. Finally, they noticed my presence. Olga shrank back in terror, while her companion started to stand up gradually. His gaze locked onto the blade I was holding. "Yura, please no. I'll clear it all up right now," my wife uttered in a trembling whisper. It seemed she believed I was about to end their lives. A small pool of liquid gathered beneath his beloved, reeking of urine. It seemed as if he had involuntarily soiled himself in terror. I couldn't help but let out a sly grin and returned the knife to its holder. After spitting at the ground, I spun on my heel and wordlessly exited the kitchen. Olga, tears streaming down her face, chased after me, her voice cracking as she yelled, trying desperately to halt my departure by clutching at my jacket. Yet, without uttering a sound, I waved her off, snatched up my duffel bag, and marched through the doorway.